is the representation and the mistakes of the past. And to be very straightforward, it means the future of an African young is not to leave Africa. The future of an African young people is not to hope to become like a European and American of the 80s. It's to become an African of the 21st century. I.e. not to develop the past business and the old businesses, but how to leapfrog in a certain way and develop new innovations, new way to proceed, green businesses, decentralized businesses, and build new opportunities. And that's my deep conviction. It's not a question of aid, it's not a question of development, because this word has sometimes, this is our word to speak about all this money. This is a question on, let's build your future. It's yours. I'm not the one to decide what will be good for a young girl or a young man in Ouagadougou or in Lagos. This is him to decide. This is just my point. And I think this is a big change in terms of mindset, because it's feasible. You know, I always take this comparison, but 20 years ago, a lot of people said, okay, we have to develop telco in Africa. It's not so far from your past business. So we will build new grids, big networks like we did in the US, in Europe. We will make, big stuff. But the mobile arrived. But look at Africa. You have just mobiles everywhere. In a lot of countries without landlines. And mobile phone works very well. You have mobile payment in a lot of countries. Much more developed than in a lot of countries in Europe and so on. Why? Because you had entrepreneurs and people deciding not to try just to bridge the gap with the other countries, but to build their own model and to say, okay, it's more adapted to my country, my model, what I have to do, what I believe in. And they did it. And for me, that's exactly what we have to do in a lot of sectors. On climate change, Africa has to become leaders in terms of solar energy, wind, decentralized energy, and so on. And we have tremendous initiatives in that direction, the Solar Mamas and a lot of initiatives like that. So it was my speech, and that's my inspiration when I speak to a young African.
That's great.
One last question before you have to go to the Security Council.
With your goalkeeper.
Next year, next year, in addition to your gracious hosting of the Global Fund replenishment, you also have the presidency of the G7. And I'm curious how you think about the message and the prioritization of the issues that you'll be taking up there, including issues like gender equality.
At the G7? Mm-hmm. Look, for me, the G7 indeed will be an occasion to try to build these new forums we need for multilateralism. We have a crisis of multilateralism, be clear. In terms of delivery, because we are much more divided, and because it could be a sort of vicious circles. Because those who doubt multilateralism are blocking it, and they can say, look, it doesn't deliver, it's useless. So we have now to build a sort of group of like-minded and build new fora in order to push our topics. For me, the new G7 has to be fully dedicated in terms of building and reshaping this multilateralism. What does it mean? On climate, I want to gather the 7 members of the club, but I think it's useful to have China around the table as well, and some other big powers, because China is more and more committed on climate change. They decided to have a carbon pricing and a carbon market. So I think we can have much more results if we have this sort of special relation on climate with China and India, by the way, and solar energy. We will speak about inequalities. It will be very useful to have a special relation with some key African countries. So my point is not to have just an outreach for a few hours at the G7, but to address gender equality, poverty, education, with some African countries and the African Union, which are totally committed to these issues. Senegal is very committed. Ethiopia is doing a great job moving into that direction. And you have some others, and African Union is a critical partner to do so. And I want us to follow this line, not just to have a communique with good words, or sometimes to have a communique to say, we agree to disagree on obvious topics, but to say, I mean, let's go as far as we can on climate, on education, poverty, health, and the G7 should be the sort of forefront of the ambitious countries on these topics. So that's how I want to conceive it. So that's why I want to open the club topic by topic to some others to be sure that we maximize the impact. And gender equality was a very strong commitment, and you had a very great role, Melinda, in the G7 chaired by Prime Minister Trudeau. And I think I want us to follow up on that. And I think in a lot of countries today, even in Europe, gender equality, rights of women to choose for herself is being challenged or refused. So this question now has to come back at the top of the list and has to be addressed precisely at the G7 agenda with a lot of other countries. And obviously, we will have a big session on health right after the Global Fund, I mean, in the context of the Global Fund replenishment, because AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria, remain very important topics for a lot of countries, and you're very much involved in that.
Well, thank you so much for, most importantly, your leadership, but also for being here with Goalkeepers. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. Keep pushing.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hello, Goalkeepers. I'm Nancy Kachingira.
And I'm Savannah Sellers.
Right, we'll just let you get your seat.